Welcome to the Rule of Law, the Academy Speaks, the official podcast of the International Academy of Trial Lawyers. And I'm Joe Tucker, president of the Academy, your host. In this series, we've been talking to lawyers who are more than advocates. They are citizens, agitators, and defenders of the institutions that make justice possible. Today's conversation is about a crisis that's shaken this country to its core: gun violence. My guest is my really good friend, Mike Haggard, a fellow of the Academy and managing partner of the Haggard Law Firm in Florida. For more than 25 years, Mike has represented families affected by shootings, mass shootings, school shootings, and senseless acts of gun violence that leave a trail of trauma and silence behind. But one case broke the barrier between advocate and victim. One case hit home. This conversation is about that line, and when the law gets personal, when justice isn't theoretical, and when trial lawyers must decide how far they're willing to go for their communities they serve. And that's what Mike is about. Mike, you've called gun violence, and I'm going to quote you here now, the new cancer. That's a powerful and painful comparison. What do you mean by that, Mike?
Yeah, well, good morning, Joe, and thanks for having me on to discuss this incredibly important topic. Unfortunately, what I mean by that is that it's going to touch everyone, and that doesn't come from me. That comes from my client, Manny Oliver, who lost his son, Joaquin Oliver, who was 17 years old and was killed at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas school shooting in Parkland, Florida, where 17 people lost their lives and 17 others were critically injured. And he told me, as I represented him and we advocated together and went to Capitol Hill, that gun violence would be the new cancer, that every family will have been touched by gun violence, that it is so prevalent in all of our communities. It does not discriminate. It is in all of our communities, some more than other, obviously, and that this would touch me. And, as you sit there, as a lawyer and we're trying cases and we're doing all the things we do, you sit there and you think about that for, man, what did he really mean? And
well, that takes me to the point, and I know you've developed a close relationship with Manny that cuts across just the typical attorney-client relationship. What did Manny teach you in this tragedy and in this grief?
Yeah, that's deep. A lot of us, when we have our clients, we don't expect them to get arrested while we represent them, or much less get arrested at the White House. Manny
Yeah.
Oliver's been arrested at a congressional hearing, protesting obviously against gun violence and Congress's absolute inept action on it. And then he was arrested at the White House when President Biden was in office, someone he had introduced, because nothing was getting done. And Manny is someone that advocates in a different way. If for those who don't know, maybe he's an artist and he paints murals throughout the country because that's his way to express his grief. Him and his wife Patricia have not stopped in 6 years since the tragedy at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. And we have become very, very close, working with a bunch of different organizations trying to advocate and get out the information that we're all on the same team here.
Yeah.
Nobody wants gun violence. And
Mike,
Manny,
I want to go back
yeah,
because some of our listeners may not recall or may not even know about what happened in Marjorie Stone, because we almost become numb to the mass shootings. Take us back and tell us about that specific shooting.
sure. Sure. Well, it was on Valentine's Day, 6 years ago. I won't use the assailant's name because in this space we don't use the assailant's name, the gunman's name, to glorify them in any way. But this young man had been kicked out of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and obtained the weapon of choice for school shootings, and there's only one, and it's the AR-15.
And how old was he? How old was he, Mike?
He was 18 years old at the time of the shooting. And it was legal to buy an AR-15 in the state of Florida at that time at 18 years old. And he bought it right after he turned 18, like we see time and time again in these instances where people buy guns legally, unfortunately, in the United States of America, and then they go on these rampages. And he went to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. He was known to the school, known to the school district as a problem. Was actually known to the FBI on a tip that he would commit a school shooting. That the Federal Bureau of Investigation was given a tip, an actual specific tip that he would do this. And he went into that school that morning, and with in this incredible reverberating sound of an AR-15, this weapon of mass destruction went into several school classrooms on two different levels and killed 17 people, 15 students, two teachers, another one of which I represented, named Scott Beagle, who was a teacher at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who sat in a doorway and took multiple shots, probably saved up to 10 to 15 kids in his classroom, and also injured 17 others on that terrible, terrible day. One of the worst days in the history, obviously, of the state of Florida in the United States.
Mike, I'm going to take this even another level, and I've been trying to get personal in this podcast with great advocates like you. What is it like to take a call from a family in a matter like this? Not just as a lawyer, but you're grieving also. Tell us what it's like to take a call like this.
Yeah, Joe, it's just gotten to the point when you know what the problem is, and that this doesn't happen in any other country in the world. This level of gun violence, that it is sickening. And I hate to say this to all the parents watching this podcast, that their children are no safer in schools today than Joaquin Oliver was 6 years ago at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. And to know that in your heart, and it keeps happening at this prevalence, it is going up, not down, is something it is gut-wrenching. I took a call yesterday from a friend who has called me several times in the Miami community over someone else dying due to gun violence. And every time, I can tell you, I lose it emotionally on the phone. I am not the cool and collected trial lawyer when I take these calls, when I meet with these families, because I know I'm dealing with something that is an epidemic in our country, and that is really robbing us of our children and robbing our children of their childhood.
This is hit home very personal to you also in a shooting that happened at UVA. I mean, it hit as close as you can come without it actually being a family member. Tell us a little bit about that, Mike.
Yeah. So, when Manny Oliver told me that gun violence was the new cancer and it would hit everyone, including me, I really didn't know what he meant. And several years ago on a Monday morning, I was waking up in New Orleans and flying home on a very early flight. CNN's in the background about another school shooting. Yeah, I'm trying to listen, trying to get ready, and I get in an Uber and I have two missed calls from a woman by the name of Happy Perry. Her son, Deshaun, played high school football with my son, Carson. He was Carson's hero. Young black kid from Richmond Heights, a tough neighborhood in Miami. Earned a scholarship to a local high school where my son went, called Gulliver High School, where Sean Taylor, the Hall of Famer for the Washington Redskins, also a victim of gun violence, went to school. And I couldn't understand at 6 a.m. what Happy Perry would be calling me about. And I thought to CNN, and I called the number back, and our high school football coach answered the phone, barely audible. And all Coach Sims could say to me was that we lost him. And Deshaun was killed along with two other teammates the day before while coming back from the Emmett Till play in Washington, D.C., getting extra credit with several of his teammates, and was killed by a fellow student at the University of Virginia who killed 3 young football players on UVA's football team and severely injured 2 others that terrible night, that Sunday in Charlottesville, Virginia.
How do you comfort a family as an attorney when something like that strikes home with them. And it also strikes you personally that you knew this young man. You had watched him play football. You'd watched him grow up.
Yeah, to be honest, that was one of the toughest cases I've ever handled because of the personal nature. I My partner Kim Wald had to almost take over in some respects. It was so personal. Um, it was the only mediation in my career. Many of obviously our fellows know my wife Becky, who's a lawyer. That Becky, who does not practice with me, came to the mediation because I had to have her there for that personal support and obviously her relationship with the family. And one thing I'll tell you is that when you represent gun violence victims, it doesn't stop with the case. There is no ending of the trial, ending of the case, and you are done. I mean, the
Mhm.
most of the Parkland case has been over for several years, and Manny and I work together on advocacy every single week. Happy
That's real.
parent.
That's real, Mike. Mike, that's real action. That's real agitation. But on the hopeful side, you've seen a growing majority of Americans, even gun owners like myself, and I own guns. We support common sense reform. What does reform look like to you, and why is it so damn hard to get there? It's ridiculous, and I'm going to use a trial lawyer term. It's outrageous.
No, it is, and you hit the nail on the head. Over 80% of Americans agree. They agree that we shouldn't have military assault rifles. There's absolutely no reason for an AR-15, and we tend to forget we went through a period where we didn't have military assault weapons. We had an assault weapon ban, and you didn't hear of these school shootings and these mass casualties during that time. Every responsible gun owner will tell you that they store their gun absolutely safely, away from their children, away from strangers. Every responsible gun owner will tell you they will pass a background check and that they are okay with a waiting period, that you don't want to sell guns to people who are in a rush and need it right then and there, and that there's sensible age requirements. All these issues poll at over 80%. So the question is why? Why can't we do that? And it's because of this gun culture and that this has become such a hot button topic where it riles up a base that doesn't want anything to happen on any of the issues I just mentioned because of the belief that the NRA has advocated that it is a slippery slope. And that has been the problem politically. There has been no movement on one side of the aisle for vast 90% of them. And that has been the incredible problem that we have faced and why 40,000 people a year, the number one cause of death of 18-year-old and up is not automobiles like it has been in the United States since the automobile was created. It is now, as of 2 years ago, gun violence in the United
Say
States of
that,
America.
Mike, you got to say that again, and you got to say it louder so people can hear what you just said. One more time, Mike.
Yeah, yeah. To show the absolute prevalence of this problem, 2 years ago, gun violence took over as the number one cause of death of 18-year and older in the United States of America. And it took over car accidents, which have been number one since the car was invented and used in the United States. That is how prevalent this problem is. 40,000 people a year in all our communities.
We got to do something about it. And Mike, what's your message to young lawyers and to older lawyers who feel overwhelmed by the scope of this crisis and who are just trying to do their work every day, as well as the larger community? What's your message?
You have to get involved. And there are some great organizations doing great work. The Brady Center has been around obviously for decades and does incredible work, not only on the legislation side with Congress and your state legislatures, but in communities, and as does Giffords. Gabby Giffords' group is unbelievable. You're going to small towns and getting communities together. And they lead with just what you were saying, Joe, responsible gun owners who don't want this to occur. And so there are a number of groups that we can all get involved in with your schools, trying to talk to your schools about, unfortunately, about security and about what they need to fortify their schools. I wish we didn't have to do that. I wish we didn't have to.
That's an absolute shame that we have to teach our kids in school how to shelter in place. And we have to show them how to lock doors and how to get under desks. Well, Mike, not just for your time today, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for standing in places most of us hope we will never have to be, and for making the law something real in the people who need it the most. To our listeners, if this conversation moved you, don't just sit there, do something. And if you enjoyed this episode, share it. We must speak out. We must advocate. Lives depend on it. This is the rule of law. The Academy speaks. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. I'm Joe Tucker. Thanks for listening. And as always, let's do like my friend Mike does. Let's agitate, agitate, agitate. That was a powerful episode. We're going to continue this conversation next week, not just with Mike, but with Josh Koskoff. Josh has handled also some of the most significant mass killings, mass shootings of children in the United States, and he's taken on the gun lobby. So if you enjoyed this, catch us next week as we continue this very important conversation about gun violence and the lawyer's role in trying to eradicate this cancer in America. Thank you.